Today on Conversations That Convert, we're going to talk about a 2025 mid-year market update and an outlook for the rest of the year. Let's get started.
Welcome to Conversations That Convert. Every week, we'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes tackling relevant lead generation, marketing, and sales topics for remodelers, home improvement companies, and home builders. Conversations That Convert is brought to you by Builder Lead Converter, your perfect sales assistant. And now, here's Rick and Daiana.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Conversations That Convert. Hello, Daiana. How are you today?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you. Looking forward for our new topic today.
Absolutely. And we are about at the mid-year. So we're going to be going over a mid-year custom home and remodeling update. And this is going to be this particular episode will be playing after the 4th of July. So for all of you in the United States, happy Independence Day. And I hope you had a nice 4th of July. We had a long weekend here, Daiana. The holiday was on a Friday. So everyone hopefully got at least 3 days to sit back, be thankful for the freedoms we have in our country and for having a country, and also to be able to spend some time with family and friends. What do you say? Should we jump into it?
Let's go ahead and get started with that. So first, how do we?
First, we're talking about national news, and this is and the reason I bring this up, Daiana, is because more often than not, when we hear market updates, we hear national statistics. Oh, prices are down this much, or inventory is up this much, or what have you. And the one thing I want to just make sure everyone understands is that you want to ignore this. It's simply sound bites. And remember, the news is looking for negative information because that gets them more clicks. And so we want to just, put that aside and ignore it. It's easy to get hung up in that, but don't pay attention to it. Just move along. And what we're going to focus on is what, Daiana?
Micro markets. What does it mean, actually?
Yeah, so micro market is really important for everyone to understand, is that every single one of you works in one or more micro markets. So let me give you the definition. A micro market is comprised, it could be as small as a neighborhood. It could be a zip code. It's potentially a school district. But there are, pockets of geographic locations in your service area that are considered micro markets. So with that being said, micro markets are really, really important to pay attention to, because you can have two neighborhoods side by side, and one of them is doing great and one of them not so much. So some of the things you look for in a micro market, or how you segment them, would be product type. So what I mean by that, it could be the type of remodeling project. It could be the type of home, single family versus association maintained, twin home versus fourplex, custom home versus production homes, that sort of thing. So look very closely at the product type. So there could be a micro market where there's a certain, type of remodeling project which is still popular, and others that have subsided. So that's really important, is first in this look at the product types, and then finally price points. So again, certain price points, and it's really important to pay attention to. It's not always lower is better. And as a matter of fact, there's many cases in micro markets around the country, in US and Canada, North America, where higher price points are performing better than lower price points. So you really have to understand what is that sweet spot where business is still happening in price points. And also, if there's a price point that's oversaturated, that's slowed down, to try to avoid that. So micro markets are really important to understand. So just as a recap here, it's going to be comprised of something as small as a neighborhood, which could be 50 to 100 homes. It could be an entire zip code, and it also could be a school district. Oftentimes that is what would be the parameters. Now, if you're a home builder and you're familiar with your local multiple listing service, you can also have MLS areas. That can also be a micro market. But more often than not, it's going to be a school district, zip or postal code, or neighborhood. Then you look at the product type. Okay, so are we talking, what type of remodeling projects are we looking at? What type of homes are we looking at? Single family versus association maintained. And then finally, look at the price points. That would be comprised of micro market. So Daiana, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. If you just keep attention and pay attention to those, that can really help you to move forward.
Exactly. And again, that if you're going to track data, track your micro
Yeah.
market data. And a lot of times your home builders association will provide some of that data to you. You can also find it free online through Census Bureau data. And then there's third party paid sites that will track data for you. Reventure is one of them. They have an app where you can break it right down to literally independent neighborhoods. All right. So Daiana, what should we talk about next?
Next, about custom homes and or new homes.
Right. So let's just give an overall here for what we have seen. Number one, spring was really pretty soft in most markets for new leads. In that, new leads were down in most markets. So if you got through the first half of the year and you thought, I don't even remember having a spring market. Yeah, you were not alone. The phone was not ringing as much. Definitely leads were soft. And if you were selling spec homes, and or just signing contracts, you probably noticed that there was a noticeable shift for this spring. Now, somebody asked why? Why is it? Was it the tariffs? Was it the elections? Was it interest rates? So there's been all of this conjecture, and so a lot of builders are sort of trying to figure out, well, why? What slowed things down? I would say there was really two primary factors here. I don't think tariffs had as much of an impact. That was more of a news cycle story, but didn't have as much as an impact as a lot of builders thought they would. And there was a lot of doom and gloom. What will happen? This could happen. This could happen. But again, we've seen, especially between Canada and the U.S. and even Mexico, we've seen a lot of saber rattling. Things say, well, this is going to happen, and all of a sudden we have a 60-day moratorium or a 90-day moratorium. And so some of these trade deals are getting worked out. So I think tariffs had as much of an impact. But what did have an impact was, I'd say, poor affordability. When you combine, if you look at, again, the price and cost of housing, materials and labor, land costs, combined with higher interest rates. And by higher interest rates, we're talking 7%. So from a historical average, that's the norm. But of course, we came from 3%, which was just, in my opinion, stupid monetary policy for us to get money that cheap, because it really, at the time, it was a short-term win. Yeah, everyone's selling homes left and right, and it's easy, and, large remodeling projects. But we sort of screwed ourselves for a period of time, because we have this entire sector of the economy that's sitting on 3% mortgages, and they're not going to move. Now, they might remodel, and so remodelers are getting some of the benefit of that, but it's really affecting new home sales because they're not going to move. So yes, interest rates were an impact, but affordability overall, in other words, the cost of housing in most markets has just gotten so high that there's less and less people that can afford it. And so demand is down. And you've all seen it. If you go, all of you that build custom homes and do large remodeling projects, if you go back and look at what you were charging in 2020 versus 2025, you will notice that a lot of times your average sales prices in some cases have doubled. I have several clients that have doubled their average sales prices, and look at land prices. And so, you have less pool to sell from. So I'd say affordability is the number one issue. Now, poor affordability affects more of the less affluent. So primarily the people that are going to finance their projects. There are still those people that are paying cash. And if you look at historically, roughly 25 to 30% of all homes across US and Canada have no mortgage. So you have people that are paying cash out there. So the more affluent people that can write a check for their home, of course, they're not as affected by affordability because they don't have to deal with the interest costs. However, I would say that the political changes, in other words, both the U.S. and Canada just had elections, prime minister in Canada and president for U.S. and, about 6 months ago. And of course, those political changes, they affect the more affluent than they do the less affluent. And that's primarily due to market. What is the markets doing? Because when you're paying cash, you have your money invested. You're also looking ahead. Are you bullish on the market, or are you are you looking, pumping the brakes and pushing back? So that's why those of you that, had some buyers that were in the pipeline that you thought were going to pull the trigger, all of a sudden they pulled back and they delayed their projects. So we saw a lot of that in the spring. People either outright saying, I'm not going to do anything, or saying, I'm going to wait to do something. It was because of a lot of those political changes. Now, I would say the sales that did happen were from people that were already in the pipeline. Again, people you probably had met in 2024. They carried over the year as you were working through design and estimating, and you sold them this spring. And inventory is increasing in most markets. So you may not be building spec homes, but the builders that are building spec homes, they are seeing a rise of inventory in most markets. So that's going to start putting downward pressure. You may have already seen a lot of incentives, a lot of price discounting in a lot of markets, especially from the larger production builders, both regional and national. That means that they're going to start pulling back on spec homes to try to get that inventory level down. So that's pretty much the overview for custom homes and new homes. Definitely has been soft, and as we'll talk about next with remodeling, I think probably a little more softer than remodeling. But Daiana, any thoughts there or notes?
Yeah, so it seems that the environment, the context is affecting us all in different areas, different industries, but the effects are similar. So
yeah, and going back to micro markets, I'm hearing from some of our clients are saying, hey, you know what? If I'm selling homes north of 2 million, I'm still doing okay. But when I'm trying to sell homes between, $1 million and 1.5 million, that's really slow right now. Well, if you take a look at it, a lot of those lower price buyers, and I say lower price 1 to 1.5 million, it's kind of amazing to say that, which just goes to show you the affordability issue. Those people are oftentimes financing. And yeah, when they're looking at a 7% rate versus a 5% rate, that's a huge number. And they're just having to pull back. And so they're either delaying projects or they're trying to find something that's used from a new home standpoint. I've also seen in some markets where there's not nearly as much transferee buyers out there. So companies that are moving people either into your local market to fill positions or expand their business, less of that is happening. So migration has certainly changed from a business standpoint and also from a personal standpoint. You've got areas like Florida where now you've got a lot of people that moved into the market during the COVID areas, because there was more freedoms there and they were working remotely. And now they're leaving that market because costs have gone way up in Florida, Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth area, very similar as well. And they're leaving. A lot of them are going back to, back quote unquote home, back to the Northeast, where, in some cases, the markets are more affordable now than they were in 2020 because prices have already come down there. So there's just a lot of shifts going on, which is affecting these little regional micro markets. All right, Daiana, what should we do next?
Remodeling. So
yeah, remodeling. So let's look at this remodeling. So remodeling in the spring, we saw a lot more yo-yo. So in other words, January was good, February then was soft. And then we came back in March and then April was down. So it was much more of a roller coaster ride. So there was new leads in remodeling. It was a better market than say for custom homes, but it wasn't consistent. So it was a little bit hard to put your finger on because one month, the phone would be ringing, you'd be meeting with people, talking about projects. And then the next month it would just go quiet. And then all of a sudden it would come back again and then go quiet. So if you experienced that too, that was pretty much the norm. But however, it was not as soft as custom homes. What we did see, though, is large project buyers. They reacted the same way as custom home buyers. In other words, a lot of them pumped the brakes. They delayed projects. They did not move forward. So I talked to a lot of remodeling clients that said, hey, I had 8, 9, 10 jobs in my pipeline, and I had 50% or more of those that did not do the project. They're outright canceled, went with somebody that says they were less money, or delayed the project. So that is way out of the norm, because normally we're seeing a 90% conversion rate from design going into contract for construction, and now all of a sudden we're seeing a 50% plus cancellation rate. That was weird. Okay, so that was definitely unusual. If you experienced that too, that was very much the norm. What we did see, though, is mid-sized projects are still pretty steady. They're not abundant, but the leads are still coming in. So people that are still doing, $100,000 to $150,000 kitchen, or doing a $50,000 bathroom, things like that. Those are still coming in, just not as abundant. So it's definitely more competitive in the marketplace. I do think that we're going to have some remodelers that maybe started during the boom times of COVID that will probably be shutting their doors. So I see as the market persists here in 2025, you might see some guys that popped up in 2020 or 2021, something like that, and now they're going to be out of business in 25. So thoughts on that, Daiana?
Yeah, so that's interesting that this is working better than the new homes and custom homes, and I think just looking at the context, it's common sense to say that we just pay attention to, we're thinking twice before we act, and we come back to our decisions. So
in going back to, it's a really good point, because going back to what we talked about with those micro markets in those neighborhoods, there are certain micro markets that are still doing really well. They're holding their value. There's still low inventory. They're high demand. So if you are a homeowner that you own in one of those high demand micro markets, and you're sitting on 3% interest rate, or you have your home paid for, your home has appreciated quite a bit and it's holding steady. So you are feeling confident enough to maybe move up in place. So maybe 6 years ago, you might have said, you know what, we're going to sell and go build our dream home. Or we're going to we're downsizing and we're going from the larger 2-story because the kids are out of the home, and we're going to build that 1-level home. And, so now what they're doing is they're moving up in place. So they're doing the remodeling project at their existing home, and they have, again, the cash to do it. So those projects are still happening. So I thought why it's really, really important as a remodeler to be able to identify those markets that are still in demand, that are still stable, that have a high percentage of those homes that are owned outright. And you will find business there, and you will find nice projects there that can be very profitable for you.
Now let's go to Outlook.
So what's going to happen, right? So let's pull out the crystal ball. What's going to happen the rest of 2025, even looking at 2026? I think Q3 is still going to be soft. And the reason is because I think there's still a lot of markets that are correcting. So you're still seeing a lot of downward pressure on prices. You are seeing existing homes in many markets where they're lowering their prices in order to get things sold. You're seeing people that can no longer sit on their 3% mortgages. They have to move for one reason or another. So inventory levels are coming up. What that means is that home builders are going to pump the brakes as it comes to spec home building for this inventory to clear through. Now, what that also means is as prices come down, that means there's more buyers that are going to come into the market. Okay. And so that inventory is going to get burned through. But again, every market is different. Some markets have a lot more inventory than others. The more urban market that you're dealing with, where you have more of the larger regional home builders and a lot more transactions, that's where you're going to see the inventory come up. But there are still going to be pieces and areas and micro markets that are going to be very desirable to get into. So I think Q3 looks soft. I do think we'll see a slight uptick for Q4. And the reason is because if you think of it this way, so we had our presidential election in the U.S. in November. Well, the prime minister election, I think, for Canada was in April. There's a certain demographic of people that thinks that the world is ending because their guy lost, or and so they're going to hunker down and delay anything. But what'll happen is that whatever that issue is that's bugging them about their home, it doesn't go away just because you delay the project. And so I think you will see people sort of come back to reality and say, okay, we want to do something. We've delayed this project. So there's a shadow market building up right now of demand that is going to continue to build up through Q3. And I think in Q4, you will see that people will start to say, you know what? All right, we're going to do something in 2026. So I do think they will be reaching out to builders again, getting back into design, looking at starting their project in Q1 and or Q2 of 2026. So more lead activity, maybe not necessarily more sticks in the construction activity, but more lead activity. And going into 2026, I do think it looks stronger. Is that we'll probably have deals worked out between Canada and Mexico for trade deals. So the whole tariff issue is going to be off the table. You're going to see now as far as there's no major election, there's midterms for the United States coming up in November of 2026, but people don't pay nearly as much attention to midterms as they do to, say, a presidential or prime minister being elected. So I think you'll see some stability there politically. People will sort of say, okay, well, I don't like this particular leader, but I'm feeling okay, financially, and so I'm going to go ahead and do my project that maybe was delayed from 2025. And prices are going to continue to correct. So what's going to happen is that as markets continue to shift in that there's price corrections, what's going to happen is we get into 2026, affordability is going to be better. So things are going to come up. And obviously inflation seems to be under control right now for the US, which is a very good thing. So if we can keep our building inflation down, we can keep wages steady, we can keep building materials from going up. And again, as prices naturally come down, more and more of the inventory is going to get gobbled up. And the more homes that are bought, the more remodeling needs to be done. The more homes that are bought, inventory comes down, and then builders can, fill that that need in a lot of those micro markets. So I think 2026 looks better overall. But again, guys, you got to remember, it's a micro market. Go back to the micro market. So what should we do? That's what's last here, Daiana. What do you think? What should we do?
Just hope for the best, and it seems that.
And so here's me saying now, hope is not a strategy.
Exactly. Yes. Couple of
things. Yeah, hope is not a strategy, and so we're not going to sit back and just say, well, we're going to wait until the phone rings again. No, what should you be doing right now? Look inward right now to improve your processes. Look at everything. Your internal processes, your systems, look for efficiencies, look to improve on your net profitability. So I'd say that's where I would focus on here the rest of 2026. And also, I think this is also a time where you should sit back and you should rebuild your marketing. So starting with your website, everything that you're doing, look at your online marketing, your offline marketing, do a refresh. Why should I do that now, Rick? The market's slow. Because you do it now so that when the market comes back, you are in a position to actually take market share, because that is what will happen. The best builders right now are going to get better, and they are going to do a better job of marketing. They're going to be more efficient. They are going to rebrand. They're going to retool. And when the market comes back, they're going to start taking market share from the builders that are sitting on their hands right now. That's why you do it right now, because anything you do today, it's 6 to 12 months before you really see the net effect of it, especially in larger design build. So focus on getting on the here and now, get your processes and systems updated, get better internally, look inward, and then look outward to rebuild your marketing, and then take advantage of that when that market comes back. Blow your competitors away and grow your business. Final thoughts from you, Daiana.
Yeah, so I still hope for the best and want to just look for stability and then just act. So I think to act, and no matter what, I think that's my final thought.
That's right. Do something. That is the final thought. So if you'd like to schedule your strategy call and find out how we can help you attract, capture, and convert high quality leads so you can pick and choose your clients and jobs, go ahead and click that schedule button below. We'd love to talk to you more about your business and see if we can help you with all these things that we just discussed here today. So for my brothers and sisters in Christ, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all always. We'll see you next time.